everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Product Management Learning Series. My name is Shivi. I'm a product manager at LinkedIn and host for today's show. The PN Learning Series is a series of live streaming events where we interview industry thought leaders and practitioners and share their PM career journey and lessons learned along the way to inspire current and aspiring PMs like you to level up your product career. So thanks for joining us, and make sure you subscribe to our newsletter in our event description to receive recap of key takeaways from this event as well as future events. So today with me, we have two special guests. So it's quite a special session, and it's a very, very timely session. And for those who are joining us, please introduce yourself in the chat where you are watching us from. Awesome. So let me bring up our guest. So first, we have Phyl. So Phyl Terry is the author of Never Search Alone, who has devoted last 25 years for helping top talent in the internet tech and product management worlds to build great product companies and careers. So Phyl, we'll talk a little bit about how you build this book, but I think it's a really exciting topic that I wanted to touch upon, because I think, with all the massive layoff happening this couple of weeks and months, this is going to be a really, really impactful topic. And also the way how you develop the book, I think can really inspire and bring to, life how product management is done. And in this case, the book is your product. And I was really grateful to have you here today and at this timing as well. And it's so important and impactful that Marty Cagan, who's a very, well-known product leader, has wrote a really nice, testimonial and foreword. And he calls it, if you ever think about a job search, starts here, your book. So I have it with me. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. It's great to be here.
Awesome. And we have a lot of folks. Please continue to introduce yourself. Also today is different from our usual session. We have a special guest, Priya. We will hear her real life story, how she applies some of the, theories, frameworks from the book. So Priya is an early reader of Phil's book and contributed to refining some of the frameworks. And as a result, Priya, you were able to successfully find a job that was the right role for the next phase of your career, which we'll talk a little bit about how you move from a smaller company and to GoPuff and become a principal PM there, and how you started a job search console. I think those are really, really good stories and tips for a lot of our audience. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Awesome. We'll have a lot of fun. So, folks, let's say some hi. We have folks from Denver, Pakistan, San Francisco, New Delhi, Austin, Chicago, quite a few folks from Chicago, NYC, Toronto, Seattle. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It looks like today we get a more U.S.-focused crew.
London, I see London there, too. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Madrid, India, Spain, which came
Madrid,
in.
Spain. Yes. Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. And so, folks, if you have any question for Phyl or Priya, please make sure you drop them in the chat, and we'll pick them out from time to time to make sure that, we address to some of your most important questions. So let's start. Phyl, why don't you tell us a little bit about your career journey and what led you to writing the book, Never Search Alone?
Okay, great. And again, Shivi, it's great to be here with you and Priya. Thank you so much. So, I was involved in the early internet back in the 90s. I was part of the startup team of the first company that Amazon bought. And then for 15 years, I was the CEO of Creative Good, a pioneering customer experience and product management firm, right? We did 400 projects. We really set a lot of the frameworks. And Marty Cagan and I started working early on. In fact, he was a client of mine when he was at eBay. And then when he went out to start the Silicon Valley Product Group, is around the same time that I began something called the Councils. So a private leadership community of senior executives in product management in particular, and general management in the internet world. And then over the years, we've had more than 2,000 product leaders come through the councils. It's been an amazing experience. Priya is actually one of them. And along the way, I ended up helping many of these leaders find a new job. And what I discovered is that the job search is broken. And no one had actually taken a product management lens to reinventing it, right? So that's what I ended up doing. I spent the last 10 years working with about 1,000 job seekers, actually, through the process. Priya's one of them, and we'll hear from her in a moment. And we went through 400 iterations of the book. I got 2,500 comments. And we learned that there were 3 major problems that we needed to disrupt. Can I say what those are? Does that make sense? Okay. The three big problems and the 3 big ideas that we discovered with the help of Priya and many others is 1, never search alone. That's the title of the book, right? Never search alone. And the idea is that most of us look for a job on our own, and it increases anxiety and insecurity. And one of the big findings is that that's true no matter who you are. So for example, I worked with a number of CEOs of digital, companies, internet companies, very successful CEOs with great track records. When they were looking for their next role, whether it was a CEO or a board role, they felt anxious and insecure, right? And if you're a product manager, you feel that way. If you're a VP of product, a chief product officer, an individual contributor, or a college student, it ran the whole gamut, if you will. And we learned, though, that if we put people together in what we call job search councils, small support groups, that it turns that insecurity into confidence, motivation, and accountability. It's really, and Priya's going to talk about that in a moment, because she actually formed one of the early job search councils and tested this with me and had a great experience. It's so fantastic. We have 65 running right now, by the way. Since we started the book, we have a free service where people can get matched to join a job search council by a volunteer team that I've organized, and we'll put you on a council and we will actually train you as well. It's really, really cool. And all of that is at phyl.org, or this link that Shivi just put up, which is the Google form where you can literally apply now and join a job search council. It's completely free. We're all doing this because we want to help everyone who's looking for a job. So that's the first idea, never search alone. The second is candidate market fit. We all know that product market fit matters, right? And that we're not going to build a good company without product market fit. Well, you're not going to build a good career without candidate market fit. So, most of us make this mistake that we go out and start looking for a job before we both know what we want and what the market wants, right? We'd never build a product that way, but we are the product in the job search, our skills and experience. So I walk people through doing an iterative, testing, basically a listening tour, if you will, market research on themselves to help them understand what they want and what the market wants. But one of the more interesting ideas, I think, in the whole book. And then third, there's 4 legs to the negotiation stool. We now mostly negotiate for comp. Now, 20 years ago, women didn't negotiate for comp. I'm happy to say that's now more true than it was before. But everyone does not negotiate for the other 3 legs: budget, resources, and support. It's the stuff that'll set you up to succeed. And in the book, I tell you how to create a job mission with OKRs when you're interviewing, and then that becomes the basis of your negotiation for everything you're going to need to succeed. And companies love this. They're blown away when you do this, and then it sets you up not only to negotiate well, but then to perform well, which is what you're going to hear from Priya in a moment. She just did a fantastic search, landed in a great job, and her career has been skyrocketing. Right, Priya? I think that's not an understatement.
Yeah, I've definitely had a great year at GoPuff, and I think it's absolutely because of just being really clear about what I was looking for and matching that to the market, as well as like really specific about what kind of culture at the company, like day-to-day work practices would fit for me. And to Phil's point, negotiating and like having lots of conversations to make sure that how I understood the role was actually what it was going to be. And that was very fruitful for me. And I think we'll get into it when we get into talking more about
we have so many things to unpack, right? Thanks, Phyl, for a quick 3-minute kind of rundown. Some of the most important, I think, first of all, insecurity happens at all level, but when you're experiencing it, right? Like sometimes you don't feel it, and job search is one of those moments that it pushes you to the extreme. That imposter syndrome is like screaming at you the loudest, right? Because you have to answer a question like, why you? Like self-intro, talk up about your achievement and don't feel like you're showboating yourself. It's hard to find that balance. But I'm really glad that you found a way to never search alone. And I think we have some audience. There are fans of this approach. Julie is excited to try
Can
out.
I say that Julie Francis, wonderful, wonderful human being, senior UX researcher, amazing career, was just laid off from Meta. And she has joined a job search council and is trying to get a lot of her colleagues from Meta to do the same. So I'm really sorry, Julie, what happened for you at Meta, for the folks at Twitter, at Amazon, and many, many other companies, right, where layoffs have happened. But we have a community with a heart and home for you. Follow Julie's lead and join a job search council. We're doing this all free. We have this great volunteer team. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad we have a community here, and we have more LinkedIn users trying to, join job search console meetings after Thanksgiving. So this is really, really exciting. And so before we go into some of that, maybe I'll give a chance actually for Priya to maybe talk briefly about your career journey as well.
Great.
Yeah, sure. So I think, as Shivi said in the intro, I started my job search coming from the startup world. So I'd worked in smaller companies, Series A, seed round companies in product leadership roles, VP, SVP of product roles. And as I was starting my job search, I knew that I was looking to go to a bigger company, something that was more in growth stage, where I could report to someone who I could learn from. And I kind of started the job search in more of a traditional way. Like, I updated my resume, I started reaching out to my network, I did a million coffee chats. And then I was like totally overwhelmed and just feeling, as you said, very just kind of stressed out and anxious. Like, am I going to be able to find what I'm looking for? Am I looking for the right thing? And is this the most efficient way? Because I also was a new parent to a 1-year-old baby, had a busy day job, which I couldn't quit because my husband was also looking for a job and, needed our benefits. And so I think a lot of people are probably in that boat too, where they're really busy and they're like, how do I find a job when I just don't have a lot of time? And what's an efficient way for me to go about this? And so Phil was one of the coffee chats that I reached out to at that time, because we had met through Collaborative Gain. And he told me, hey, guess what? I'm actually writing a book all about this, if you want to read a draft. And I told Phil, and I think it's in the quote of my review of it, but it was literally like reading a thriller. I was like up all night finishing his book, because it was so targeted towards what I was going through, towards like the templates and things that I needed. And so it was just awesome to find that at that time. And of course, his first piece of advice was, form a job search council, go through these exercises to really articulate what you want, and then go market test it. And I love how Phil makes that analogy to product, because I think that's why it really resonated with me. It's like, I know how to build product, and I just didn't think about applying all those same skill sets to my job search. And so it really shifted the way I thought about it. I kind of went about the candidate market fit almost like product discovery. Like, let me figure out if I'm on the right track.
Yes.
So I'm sure we'll dig more into the details, but I ended up in a role at GoPuff, which is, if people don't know, we're an instant delivery convenience product where you can download our app and get ice cream and snacks and alcohol and lots more delivered to your door in less than 30 minutes. And I'm on the consumer product team working on search and discovery. And I can say it was just like amazing fit for me. I've learned so much this year. I've been just so happy that I went through that process. And one of the things I say is, all the things on that list that I, followed Phil's template, every single one of them pay off for me every day. Like, I really love my manager. I've learned so much from him. Even small things like I prioritized having a culture that had written communication is just something I'm so thankful for, because I think it's really helped me thrive, because that's the way that I best communicate my ideas. So I'm sure that we will dig more into all the details, but can't recommend this approach enough, especially if you're someone who's just, starting their job search or in the middle of a job search and just feeling like it's overwhelming, it's disappointing, you don't have direction, there's so many emotional highs and lows. I think those feelings are very natural and everyone goes through them, but Phil's approach can really make it so much better.
Yeah.
I think it really resonates with some of the audience as well. Phil, you have a lot of fans, I think, in our audience group. Lee has just recently started his job search console and joined one, and have already met twice. So the emotional support was tremendous and everything. So everyone attested to, just this approach. And Sarah also share about your LinkedIn group, which we'll also include in our newsletter recap in case folks didn't have a chance to check them out. So
Yeah.
Phil, I want to ask, let's say, okay, hypothetically, we're
Yeah.
sold that we needed this emotional support because,
Yeah.
you know, all the imposter syndrome, it's helpful to be able to manage this emotional balance. And especially
Yeah.
for mid-career professionals, right? You have a lot going on in your life in addition
Yeah.
to a job. Maybe there's kids,
Totally.
there's a lot of other responsibilities. What are some keys or best practice to form the right job search console? Like, do
Yeah.
you need to find people at the same stage as you, same type
Yeah.
of job? What are some good practice for people to
Yeah.
effectively form it? Obviously, sign up for the forum
Yeah.
to help you with the matching, but tell us a little bit about best practice to
Sure.
get the most out of this social experience.
Yeah. And obviously I'll ask Priya to chime in. And I just want to say that Priya, thank you so much. You were one of my best readers and early users, and you gave me such great feedback. It really made the book and the whole process so much better. I just want everyone to know that. I had about 250 early readers, job seekers, and they all helped. But Priya was really one of the people who put enormous effort and thoughtfulness into it. So if you read my book and like it, you ought to thank Priya, as well as my mom, who the book is dedicated to. My mom started the first council in 1960 for elementary school teachers in Los Angeles. We may get a chance to talk to her, but let me answer your question now. So how do you form a job search council? Should it be everyone looking for the same job? Should it be? So here's what we've learned. There's a couple of rules. One, we want people at the same level, more or less same level of tenure, right? So it's not going to be chief product officers and individual contributors, right? So you're going to want to get that right. You also, you want some variation, some diversity is really important. And diversity in terms of, so it's not all, it doesn't have to all be product people, right? It could be a mix of product and UX and marketing, whatever, design. It's nice when you have a little bit of that mix, because then everyone's not going for the same job, right? And you can really learn from each other's perspective. You also want diversity in other, in terms of gender and race, if you can. It brings real perspective, sexual orientation. By the way, this is Transgender Awareness Week. I just wanted to do a shout out for that. 68% of Americans say they've never met anyone who's transgender. So everyone who's here today, you've now met someone. And it's an important week of remembrance of the violence that's happened, and the struggle for civil rights. But that's one of the big things that we do when we match people, Shivi, is we actually divide them between what we call fast seekers and slow seekers. So fast seekers are people who, Julie Francis just laid off from Meta, right? So she's now looking for a job. This is her job full-time to find a job. She's a fast seeker. We're going to put her with other fast seekers, other people who are out of work looking for a job. Priya, on the other hand, she had a slow seeker council. These were people mostly in jobs, balancing their lives with, children and everything and their work, and they were looking for their next thing. That's what we call a slow seeker council. So we don't mix those two because the cadences are different, right? So you're going to meet weekly in a fast seeker council. You're going to meet maybe twice a month in a slow seeker council. We have a whole training program, and this is all free because we're building a volunteer community. All these volunteers, not just me, are really helping out. It's amazing. We will give you, not only will we match you, but we'll give you orientation. We give you many, like 15 different tools and templates. And we keep going with, Q&A and open houses to help you at every step of the way. My mom was this way. My mom, whenever someone needed something, she was always there for them. She taught me the power of asking for help, of building councils. And so this community, this book and this broader community, she died 10 years ago this year, is dedicated to her. This is exactly what she would have wanted to see happen. And it warms my heart that we can do this and bring her. Her nickname was Chick, by the way, for friends and family. So we're bringing Chick to the world. That's what we're doing right now. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. I think something comes to mind. I feel like you are such a supportive, warm-hearted person for remembering your mom, right, and bringing her sort of legacy and manifested in a way that's really needed right now. You're also remembering, your identity and sharing that with us, right? So, and then obviously this free job console, and not just matching, but also providing the foundational onboarding to set
Yeah.
us up, set all the
Yeah.
groups up for success.
Yeah.
Just to share a couple more loves from the audience, Andrew here is a moderator for the Job Search Console and just finished the 3rd meeting, and it's been a transformative experience for him. And
Can
then
I say a
also,
shout out on Andrew for a
yes,
moment? So Andrew, so this is a broad community. Product management's at the heart of it because we've taken a product management mindset and redesigned the job search. But Andrew's a CFO. He had worked at, Icon is a major, a financier and on Wall Street. He'd worked in Icon Enterprises. He's looking for, so he's got a job search council with a former Goldman Sachs partner and like the CFO level people, right? There are CEO councils. And then you were just going to share Karen Firstman, her next quote. So she's a customer experience leader. She helped to start the Customer Experience Association. She's been, she's terrific. And like many of us who are middle-aged facing ageism, and how do you actually continue with your career? And she's been a leader in this community and built and run a job search council. And let's give congratulations because she just got a great job. Woohoo! That's awesome. And she negotiated, she used her job mission. She used her, listening to her to figure out what she wanted, her candidate market fit. And then she negotiated for all the things that are going to help her succeed, which is good for the company as well as for her, by the way. I'm sorry. So I just wanted to shout out that.
No, kudos to you, Phyl. Like, I can only imagine you working with so many people. How do you all remember their story, their stage of search? And it just further to show that how much you care about this.
It's my mom.
And I think
it's my mom. She
all
taught
right,
me this.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Remembering her. And I think folks keep mentioning in the chat as well to say how great, to clarifying free isn't just like, it's too good to be true, but it is this free supportive community, and then wanted to sincerely helping people, not just a scam for people to sign up, right? So I'm really like
timeshare. We're not going to tell you a timeshare.
I have to say too, it's like so fun to see the chat and like all the people that volunteered and all the job search councils, because for me, it almost feels like I saw Phil's book as like a little seed round company, and it's like exploded into this crazy rocket ship because, none of this existed when I was forming my job search council, and I was like reaching out to random people in Slack community groups. And like, I would have loved to have what exists now. Even just when Phil's book came out, I was like, thank God, because I keep bothering Phil to like let me share his Google Doc with other people about the drafts of the book, because I just think it's so helpful. And I'm so happy that there's so many free resources now that are so easy to share with people, because I do find them to be so helpful. So it's just like very inspiring to see how engaged everyone is with these communities. And it's not surprising, but it's awesome.
You helped to create this, Priya. That you should feel so much pride. You did. You really helped to create this.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
This is awesome. I'm loving the community here. Everyone's cheering each other in the chat. So Phyl, let's talk about, you mentioned a couple of times, candidate market fit. Yeah. And that's one of the most important things in product as well, right? Yeah. Mark Foreword's, Mark Anderson from A16Z talk about product market fit is the only thing that matters.
Yeah,
I think it's probably almost true for someone who's finding a job as well.
That's right.
But people sometimes, I came across a lot of job seekers. I think a lot of times that people take the wrong job, right? They jump in too fast or too soon, or they get too desperate or too exhausted from the process, so that they don't really find the right job for them. But then sometimes, on the other hand, I also met people who are like overconfident that they didn't really have the right qualification, but they wanted a job at their dream company.
That's right.
How do you think people can find that right balance? What are some steps and best practice? Yeah.
This is so important. And I just want to pause and say, it's hard. I understand. That's why we need the support group, right? Because either we all have our own perspective, right? But we don't necessarily understand how the market sees us and where the market opportunity is. And we haven't also even thought about what we really want. I mean, last year, you remember the Great Resignation. That was the big news a year ago. Before all the layoffs, oh gosh, this world keeps changing. 75% of the people who took new jobs in the Great Resignation got paid more and are unhappy, right? Priya is not one of them. She happened to do it in that time frame, but she took a great job and she's really happy. And, it's just working really, really well. So, so we came up with this concept of candidate market fit. And you're right. Sometimes we overestimate, sometimes we underestimate, or sometimes we just don't think about it at all. So I'll give you, and the overestimation is hard, but that's why you need the support group. So let's say, we had a job search council member who was a senior executive at a big traditional media company. Okay. Ran a product and design team of about 200 people. Okay. This was in charge of sort of their online and nascent streaming service stuff. And he eventually realizes that he's not in the right place. And like Priya, he wanted to go work for kind of a leading company, one of the top streamers in Silicon Valley. And he went and he discovered his candidate market fit was going to have to be more like an individual contributor role. This is like a major change, right? So corner office, 200 people, first class flights, you know what I mean? Traditional media, blah, blah, blah. But he had a job search council, he had a support group. And what became clear is he needed to take that step so then he could totally transform things. And to his credit, he did. And now a couple of years later, his whole career has changed, right? And he's able to do and get jobs that he couldn't get before. He had to take an intermediate step. Priya had to take an intermediate step. She realized that, she was a big fish in a very small pond, and that she needed a bigger and more advanced team that she could learn the best product management practices from. So she went from essentially a CPO role to an individual contributor role, but is totally transforming her career. Now, of course, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the other way around, right? Sometimes people underestimate what they're, so that's a really wonderful surprise. Or sometimes people don't realize the possibilities. So we had a member who was a chief data officer, and she was going to look for CTO roles. She spent a year spinning her wheels, couldn't find anything. Finally, she came to me. I said, put a job search council together and then do your listening tour. This is where you go out and and I walked through, I have a structured way to do this in the book. There are 3 different kinds of conversations that I want you to have. And I can talk more about that in a moment. So she did that, and she did a recruiter interview. One of the conversations is a recruiter interview. This is not asking a recruiter for a job. This is asking a recruiter for their insight, for their advice. And recruiters love this because no one asks them. They always say, well, I want this job. Why don't you get me this job? So I say, ask a recruiter, what could I get tomorrow? What might be a stretch but is doable, and what's out of the ballpark, so to speak. So she did that with a recruiter, and the recruiter said, you know what? You are not a fit for a traditional CTO role. But there is a new thing happening in the market where there are companies hiring CTOs with data science backgrounds, and you are perfect for that. And so, bam, she got her candidate market fit, and within 3 weeks had 3 offers, right? So she spent a year sort of spinning around without clarity, that nuanced, focused clarity. And so I think that's a beginning to answer your question, Shivi. Is that
I have to say, like, the recruiter thing is like the best tip. I wrote it down on what do I want to share? But I totally took Phil's advice on that, and it changed all of my recruiter conversations, because I also started responding to every single recruiter, because I'm like, great, this is opportunity for feedback. And ask feedback on my resume. I would ask them Phil's magic questions, and it was really insightful because they're going to give it to you straight. They're going to just tell you because they have no reason not to. And it was super helpful feedback. I remember one recruiter telling me well, this, look, to be honest, looking at your resume, I can see that you can take a company from $0 to $1 million or from $0 to $5 million, but you don't have experience at that next stage, going from, 10 to 20 to $30 million. And that would be the stretch for you, for me to place you into a VP or director of product role, which you're trying to get into growth stage company. Right. So it really helped me elaborate, what are the forks in the road that I have to choose? Yes, I can get a VP of product job at an early stage company, but if I want to go to a growth stage company, maybe I can't get that level of role. And do I even want it? Right. Because I want to learn from somebody. And so really made me, take a step back and think differently about the role. And then the other very concrete piece of feedback that I took from one recruiter, I had many different versions of my resume, as I'm sure all of you guys do out there. But one version I had a section called selected writings that had posts that I had written on LinkedIn about my experiences, which Shivi knows well. She's such a big proponent of writing on LinkedIn. And I would encourage everyone here, who's trying to like, work through a job search, like write about all your lessons learned because you have lots of things to share. And the recruiter was like, that really stood out. That was really unique. I would definitely keep that on your resume. And it also just, shows how you're willing to like share what you've learned and what you have learned in a really unique and compelling way. So I had like debated on whether to keep it in there. So I definitely recommend doing that conversation, and also the whole candidate market fit conversation in what Phyl calls the listening tour with your network, which is, in my mind, was way more fruitful than just going to your new network and saying like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you know anyone looking? Is to say like, hey, I really thought about what I want next in my next role. I wrote up this whole document, like, let's go through it and talk about it. It really helps your network understand what you're looking for. And then everybody's on the lookout for those jobs that perfectly match what you're looking for. And it's just a much better way because the intros that you get are actually the ones that you want. And that just goes back to, how do you have an efficient job search when you're busy with many other things?
Yeah. Hey, by the way, there's in the chat, we can keep going a little bit longer because people are asking, they want us, can we go a little bit longer? I know people are saying.
Yes, we can stay for another 10 to 15 minutes for folks who can stay. And if not, if you would need a drop off, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter with the link in the description so that you can hear recap or also watch a replay of this event. So recordings are available. And I also like what Garrison summarized this conversation with recruiter. What I find the most smart is that it's very targeted. It's very efficient, right? Because recruiter knows the market, they knows you. And not a lot of people ask for their opinion, like you said. So whenever you ask them, hey, people feel good about like, hey, you're trusting my expertise. And here's what make them part of your job search console, pretty much is what I think I'm hearing. Awesome. So I do wanted to talk about during the intro, as you were talking about the 3 different aspects, you mentioned one important one was a lot of times, I think it's an extension of this candidate market fit, right? Let's say during part of the interview process, what kind of questions or what do you need to do with the hiring team and the hiring manager to like kind of vet that this is the right opportunity for me to make sure you align with expectation and then you're setting yourself up for success?
Yeah. So first of all, one of the key ideas here is that we're saying you are the leader of your job search. You are active. You are in charge. So when you're interviewing with a company, you're in charge. Yeah, the company, is going to do what they're going to do, but you need to interview them, of course. And in my book, I have a whole chapter with a whole bunch of questions to get at things like culture, which is so, so important. But the big idea is that once you start to get serious with a company, then you write a job mission, a version of a job description, what you think the job is with OKRs that you think you're going to be responsible for delivering on, right? And you do that sort of midpoint. So, and the first benefit of doing that is you realize as you write it, oh, I'm not sure if I understand this or that or the other thing. So it can drive questions that you ask in future interviews. And then once you have a more solid version, you show it to the hiring manager and it is gold. They love this. Very often they will actually have long conversations. We've had many members, they'll call me on the weekend and say, this is amazing. Can we talk through this? Like, you understand this better than I do. You have to understand companies do not understand what they're hiring for most of the time. They don't know what the heck they're doing. So you need to be in charge. And then, and it, how many times have you taken a job and you thought it was A and it turned out to be B, right? So this drives clarity and alignment. And then it sets you up to negotiate, not just for comp, which we want you to certainly negotiate for, and all of the elements of comp like equity, et cetera. And your job search council helps you do all that. But the budget, resources, and support so you can succeed. Now every job is going to look different. Even for the same candidate, they might negotiate different budget, resources, support depending on the company and the role, right? And if it's a more junior role, you're not going to be able to negotiate much budget, for example, but you can negotiate things like mentoring, skip level meetings with your boss's boss, training, additional training and support, connection to programs inside the company that will help you. If you're saying that you want this, companies want to hire ambitious people. They're like, wow, this is fantastic, and they're going to give you more support when you join. And that generally leads to more promotions. So I'll just give you an example, an A/B test. There were 2 chief product officers who were going up for jobs at SaaS companies, B2B SaaS companies. Most people on this call know that vernacular, business to business software as a service company. One identified, it was a CPO/CTO role in both cases. One identified about $20 million in technical debt. And so I said, you've got to negotiate that technical debt as reducing that, eliminating that as part of your offer. So they did. They spoke to the CEO and the board. Day one, they wrote a check for $20 million. 6 months later, the technical debt is gone. They can start to do new product development. It goes so well that a year later, they essentially promote him and make him GM of a division of the business in addition to the chief product and technology officer roles. And then 18 months later, they're interviewing him for the CEO spot. Person number 2 identifies $10 million of technical debt. I say, you got to negotiate that. They ask for it. The CEO says, no, come in, make a case. Day 1 makes the case. Nothing happens. Month 3, nothing happens. Month 6, nothing happens. Year 1, nothing happens. They're looking for a new job, right? So they should have, at that moment when they would not guarantee that, they should have gone and looked somewhere else for a company. This is a very experienced person who can very quickly identify the ballpark of technical debt, right? They've done a number of B2B SaaS turnarounds. So instead they end up, and they're going to get a good job. But look at the difference. We don't have infinite time in our careers, right? So we need to get good jobs that will get us where we want to go as fast as we can, with the culture and the values that support us, right? And that's what we're trying to talk about here. So yeah. This job mission with OKRs it's one of the gold pieces that we created, right, Priya?
Yeah, it's great. And I will say 2 things. One, it seems super awkward to ask for an additional meeting with your hiring manager to go through this. So I just want to say,
yes, so important. Yes, it does feel awkward. Thank you for saying that.
About it. For everyone who's hearing this and being like, okay, but like, would I actually do this? But Phil was like, Priya, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. So I wrote the doc. I was like, I need more time with the hiring manager to talk about this. And we went through it, and he was like, as Phil said, like, wow, you put all this together. And we had this great conversation. It went 30 minutes long. All the things that Phil says, they actually were supposed to give me like a take home exercise. He was like, I don't think you need to do it. Like, this is kind of the stuff we would have covered anyway. And so it was definitely really useful. And I would say my experience that inspired all of my other Job Search Council members to do it. And as Phil said, like, it's shocking when you actually think about how little we know about the role and how little we dig into it and then actually accept it. Like, one of my Job Search Council members, we were looking at her doc and we're like, well, how many people are reporting to you? And like, what are their roles? And she was like, they haven't really been able to like tell me. We're like, you need to ask that. Like, you need to ask and like ask for names. And like, it was definitely a red flag for her during the process that they said these people are going to report to her, but it wasn't clear who, wasn't clear how many. She ended up taking the job knowing that was a risk. And, lo and behold, no one reports to her. They hadn't figured it out. Like, they never got the head count. And so I definitely think these things are so important to do. And I think that the light bulb that went off in my head from Phil's advice was, you can't like wait until the end of the process when you have an offer to vet the company. Like, it's one, not enough time, because they're trying to make a decision. You're trying to make a decision. 2, once you already have the offer, you and they will be emotionally invested in the role. It is so, so hard to turn down an offer. And then the third thing is, like, if you have multiple offers, which I did at the end, it's really hard to find the time, right? Because you're trying to get all the things to match up at the same time. And so I definitely recommend what Phil says, which is like, there's not enough time in a standard interview circuit to ask the questions that you need to ask. Like, that 5 minutes at the end is not at all enough time to vet the role. So you need to ask for more time. And I've given this advice to so many people after Phil gave me the advice. It's awkward to ask for more time, but you have to do it because 1, you need to vet the company and know that it's the right fit. And 2, well, as Phil's saying, it makes them appreciate and value you more because you're being proactive, you're being diligent. It makes it seem like you have other options. And so I've never had anyone turn me down for additional time. And I think it's absolutely worth it because you can ask all the questions you want if you get another 30 minutes, another hour with a hiring manager. Also, after I got the offer, I asked for even more conversations. I asked to talk to a woman because there was no woman in my hiring.
So important. Yeah.
I asked to talk to a designer because I never talked to a designer. And so I would definitely recommend asking enough questions and for enough time to make sure that you really, really understand the role, understand the culture, and understand what you're walking into. And I've definitely, through the process and through having a lot of people reach out for advice, seen many people take a job and leave 3 months later, 6 months later, because the job was not what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this is so important. Thank you, Priya, for sharing your story. I think it resonated with the community. And I also think that, as I was hearing Phyl talking, I was like, wow, this feels bold. It's great in the sense of like you're actually taking charge of the conversation, moving it along. You're not completely passive and sitting and letting the hiring team dictate where you want to go, right? But it does feel like a little nerve-wracking. Like, how do you do it? Like, what's the actual practice? Now it makes me so curious. I want to check out the job mission and the OKR resources and figure out, okay, so how do I approach it? What question I ask? And then just, you need to practice that muscle, right? Like what Allison said, like best do this before you take it. Because I do think that there's like what Priya mentioned, like there's the shift of energy, there's the emotional sunk cost that you invested so much later in the job, right? Like you already feel like I'm so exhausted, I'm ready to take on this. It's a risk. And we see a lot of times that people promise you vaguely about what a job could be. And then it didn't turn out to be like what happened, right? There's so many factors. And once you finish, like once you sign an offer, for example, that power also turn back to the company. So you kind of lose that sense of influence or getting the momentum, keep that going.
This is your moment of leverage. And by the way, I made this mistake coming out of business school, years ago. I went and took a job at McKinsey, but didn't vet the job, and they promised all kinds of things, and it turned out not to be the case. And I walked out the door 7 months later. It's like, OMG, and I'm fine, but like it's demoralizing, right? And you need to figure like it's so much better if you do this. And yes, it's awkward to ask, but if they don't think it's a good thing that you asked, that is a huge red flag, by the way, right? Like run. Priya, do you want to talk a little bit? A number of questions came through in the chat about like what did you turn down? Like you don't have to name names, but can you say like how your thought process worked and what you decided to turn down and why?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was looking for companies that were, at a bigger stage. And so I would say like comp honestly wasn't the biggest factor for me because they were all kind of coming in around the same level. I think the biggest things for me were like the very specific things about the culture. Like I was going to work remote at all of the companies that I was talking to for the most part, because I live in Chicago and, I wanted to work for a bigger tech company. Some of them were, one company was like 100% remote, like everybody's remote, we have all the like kind of processes in place. Like another company was like very Bay Area based, and there were starting to open up to remote. So they were comfortable with this role being remote, but not all teams were remote. And most of my interviews were actually scheduled after like 5 p.m. my time, which just kind of was a signal to me that like this would be a hard culture for me to work in, because I would end up, having to work a lot of evenings, and I have a baby. And so like those kind of cultural things were big for me. The PM role is so different at different companies. And so just really digging into that, I realized
so
how
important
it was at the different companies that I was looking at. Like in one company, the PMs really were like full stack, did everything, had complete autonomy, but also had like, didn't have a lot of cross-functional support. So like they were able to launch experiments super fast, but they also were responsible for all their own data analysis, all their user research, even some design where they would like work in Figma. And, at another company, it was like, you've got all the cross-functional resources you could dream of, but you're at a big company with like lots of the work is blocking and tackling between different teams, getting alignment, getting communication. And so a lot of questions are about that. And I think GoPuff was really like this nice, like kind of happy medium in the sense that it was like pre-IPO stage, like still a startup, relatively small product and engineering team, but had scale. So I knew I was going to be able to A/B test. I was going to be able to move fast. We had some cross-functional counterparts, but you're still doing a lot as a PM. So it just was the right balance for me. And the other big thing for me that was, you have to prioritize the list of things that you're looking for, right? That was one of the biggest feedback that I got from, my listening tour was like, okay, all these things make sense. We have like 15 things on your list. And so I realized that like number one for me was having a great, inspiring manager who I could learn from, because I had been reporting to CEOs for the last 5 years who were not product people. And so one of the reasons I wanted to go to a bigger company was to learn from someone. And one of the big companies that I was in at the end, people I talked to that worked there were like, I've had 6 managers in 3 years. I've had 4 managers in 3 years. And it was like, there's lots of great things about working at that company, but they have lots of reorgs. They're growing fast. Like you can't count on that continuity. And I actually had a couple connections to the manager that I report to at Gaurav, and they really sung his praises about what a great leader he was, how much I could learn from him. He had done search and discovery at Airbnb and Amazon before. So I really saw that he was a leader that I could learn a lot from. And I would say like it's like 10x my expectations in terms of how much I've learned from him. He is an amazing, amazing leader and manager. And I learn every single day, ask him for help, ask him for feedback. And he's just like very collaborative and great to work with. And yeah, I mean, I think we're, in a great partnership in our, the work that we've done together this year. And that's what I really was looking for. And now that I have it, I think I didn't even realize how much I would appreciate it. And I told Phyl this, that like, I got some recognition from the company, after my kind of 1 year mark was hit. And the first people I shared it with was my job search counsel. And I just said like, thank you guys so much for like getting me through, the hard onboarding time, and also just like helping me make sure I found the right thing, because, I didn't realize how kind of like starved for like appreciation and just like that feeling of like really like killing it at your job that I feel now, because in the startup world and leadership especially, you just don't get a lot of that. It's like a lot of just like more of the cold, hard market reality of how your product is doing. And so, there's lots of trade-offs. There's lots of great things about being in a small startup as well. But yeah, I definitely think that that ultimately you have to figure out what you're looking for, what's important to you. And my list was totally different than other people in my job search council, even though we were all at the same level. We were all looking in roughly the same comp range. Like, I had actually, just one more story, a role that I talked to somebody about that I realized wasn't the right fit for me. It was a like role at a company that was in a B2B, more B2B than what I was looking for. Also like very integrations heavy. And I just suggested it to someone else in my job search council, because I was like, she's done a lot of this work before. She has an engineering background, like, and she was super excited about it and actually ended up taking that role. And so
love that.
Really cool. Because, you kind of think like being in a job search council of other people at your level, like, are we all going to be competing for the same roles? But like often people are looking for different industries, different kinds of jobs. There's so many flavors of product and other kinds of roles. So we definitely shared like, hey, this recruiter talked to me about this role. It's not a fit for me. What do you think about it? And actually 2 of my job search council members like went to companies that I had connections at. So really, really fun to see that, and can't recommend it enough.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Embracing an abundance mindset, right, versus scarcity, thinking that you're competing with, your job council member on the same job, but actually, you help each other out and gaining more perspective. I think one question was asked about how do you keep motivated during this tough time? Hey, that's when you need the social support. I also think that it really resonates, like Priya, some of your criteria with Allison, prioritizing the manager who you can learn from, right? The culture, the growth opportunity over compensation, and prioritize happiness is what I usually say. I think Phyl and Priya, we're coming up a little bit on time, but I do wanted to address one question. I'm sure you have resources about it. I had that question in my mind when I was hearing your story and your tips, but maybe just very quickly, can you share some examples of question that you would ask, in that like midway through that interview process, just very tactically, what are some good questions to ask so that you can start to build up your job mission and the OKR and actually make sense. It's not some weird stuff that you made up, right? So you can have this fruitful, productive conversation with your hiring manager.
Great. So first of all, there's a ton of questions in the book and online, and I point to other online resources. There's a lot of great stuff out there. I just want to say a couple of things. First, Priya mentioned this. It's so important when you're starting to get serious with the company that your questions not only be to the hiring manager, but to other people inside the company. Priya asked to speak to a woman, and people outside the company who can give you some back channel due diligence. People who have worked, use your LinkedIn, please, and find like who has this person worked with before that I could go talk to and find out what they're like to work for, right?
I did that too, by the way. And Shivi and I went to business school together, so she knows that. But there was somebody who left GoPuff like after I think 6 months on the job, who went to business school with us. I didn't know him, but I reached out to him on LinkedIn because I was like, I got to do a back channel on why he left. And it was super insightful. And, I still took the job, but I got, kind of the, what are the red flags about the company? Like, would they affect me in my role? And I got to ask him like a lot of great questions. So yeah, definitely recommend that. Look for people who've left the company if you can find them and talk to them. And it's very helpful.
Another question I'll add is one of my favorite questions is, can you tell me about a recent hire you made like me or in this role that did not work out, and why? What didn't work? And then you can ask the same question in inverse, a recent hire that did work out, what happened there, right? So there's a lot of ways you try to get to and around and understand the culture. The other thing I would say is that, and I talk about this in the book, you've got to really pay attention to how the interviewer works with you. Do they listen? Are they a good listener, right? You're going to see their best. I had one person call me after an interview. I said, how'd it go? They said, oh, it went well. I said, really? Tell me more. Well, about halfway through the interview, they got a phone call and they took it and they talked for about 15 minutes. And then they came back to me. So you think that went well? Like, that's terrible. Like, who wants a boss like that? They're interviewing you. What are they going to, they're not listening to you. Or I had one, another guy, they were on the computer the whole time. They weren't really listening. Like don't go work there. Like pay attention to how they are with you. They will tell you a lot in their behavior, if you will. And we all want the job to work out. So we'll replace the reality we're seeing with the hopes and wishes that we have. This is another reason. Go ahead, Priya.
I was going to say, that's my biggest piece of advice to this question, which is like, I would, and I did, ask your job search counsel what questions you should ask. And also ask your network because, we had meetings weekly. So we would talk about like, here are the opportunities I'm in later stages. I'm going to this meeting with my manager. Here's what I'm thinking about like asking. Right. And they would suggest other questions. Like I said, I suggested to my colleague, or my job search council member, like, you need to ask about who's reporting to you. Like, what are their names? Like, because they'll tell you the things that you're not thinking about because, as Phyl said, you kind of rewrote the story. So like one of the things, for example, like I went back to my kind of listening tour, was talking to them about like, here are the things that, I'm hearing from the job. Here's what I'm thinking about asking. And they were like, one of the concerns that you have is there's this big kind of like rewrite going on from the technical side, and that you won't be able to ship a lot because it might take a long time. Like ask them like, what's the date that like it's actually planning on shipping, and like, what's the risk to that date? Like plus or minus how many months? Like you need to and like, what's the contingency? Like, what will you work on if it doesn't ship? Like you need to like really dig in on that one. Cause that seems like, out of everything you're saying, the biggest risk factor in taking this job. And I'm really happy I did that. Like it definitely turned out to be like the, backup plan scenario in that scenario. So yeah, I would ask your job search counsel because it's so specific to like the role and what you're looking for and what you've heard and what you haven't heard in terms of what questions to prioritize. So I would, come up with your own list and then ask them like, what am I missing?
And in fact, if this is recursive, ask for help. The whole process is ask for help, ask for help, ask for help, and have a job search council where you can ask for help, and ask for help. And
I would just say it does feel exhausting, the whole process. Like it's tiring because it's so much work. It's actually like a ton more work to like say, I'm going to go out and have 5 extra conversations that are not in the interview loop, right? Like I'm going to go back to my network, have 5 more coffee chats when I'm not even looking for new leads. But it's just so totally worth it because it'll give you confidence that you're taking the right opportunity and that you've really vetted and found all the opportunities that make sense for you. And so it's worth the extra time. And you save a lot of time by not talking to companies that aren't the right fit. And as Phyl said, dropping out of processes when you realize that they're not the right fit. And so ultimately, I think it is more efficient.
And when you do this and you do it well with a company and you do the job missions with OKRs, you talk about all this stuff, like they're now more invested in you. So you're set up to succeed from day one, just like you have achieved. I'm just so happy to see you so happy, Priya. I really am. It's like, you are going to go far. It is just fantastic. Like, I can't wait to see where you go in the world. Right. And I love that yes, it's more work, but you're investing in yourself. You took the time. You're worth it. All of you on this call, you're worth it.
And the one last thing I'd say, like, is the other questions that I like to ask in the additional time is kind of counterselling a little bit on things that you think you're worried about, like, am I the right fit, right? And I think people are nervous about doing that because they're like, well, I don't want them to realize something about me that they don't think makes me a good hire. But like, you want to figure that out before you take the job, not after you take the job and then you're not doing well in the job, right? So for me, like, one of the things was, well, GoPuff seems really intense and it seems like it's in this really high growth stage, but I have a 1-year-old and like, I'm not in a stage of my life where I can work nights and weekends. And I was worried about that. And I gotten some signals. And so I was like,
don't tell Elon Musk this.
Yeah. I was talking about it with Phyl, and Phil's like, just ask them. You need to ask them, like, what hours do people work? How often do people need to work late? Like, you need to just like lay it out on the table, like, so that you know if it's the right fit. And so I had a really good conversation with my manager about it. And I was like, look, I'm willing to put in extra time. We have a launch when there's something important, but like, it's not something that I can like do regularly as part of my other responsibilities. And so I want to understand, like, how many, like, what's the synchronous, one of the questions I like to ask is like, what's the synchronous working hours that people typically work? Like, when do people log in? When do people log out? And there were companies that told me, like, honestly, like, people log out at 5, but most people log back in at 8. And that's just kind of, after their kids go to bed, after dinner, that's just kind of our culture right now. Cause we're, really like, trying to, meet aggressive goals or whatever. And obviously didn't hear that from my manager at GoPuff, who was really understanding, supportive, was like, we've got to just make sure we're signing up for goals that we can achieve. And I find that it's about like, being efficient and making sure we're working on the right things and all those things. And he also has 2 young kids that are under 5. And so we had this really great conversation about it. And I feel like I've absolutely benefited from that every day in my role, because I feel comfortable being like, here are my boundaries around how much time I can work. And like, I stick to them, and I've had a really great personal life as well as professional life. And I know that's probably very important to people that are on the call. And don't be afraid to ask those questions and like, put out there what will work for you, because it's so much better to ask those questions and make sure it's the right fit before you go somewhere and you're like, this isn't sustainable for me. And you have to find something else.
Priya is amazing. You're amazing,
I love
Priya.
that. Keep it up, Priya. LinkedIn community is cheering for you. And I think this whole conversation is like really resonating. It's so impactful and so uplifting, right? AJ said she loves a group like this and hope, give her hope. And then amazing, you're giving strength to all of us. So great. Thank you. Feeling really pumped after listening to this amazing knowledge. Definitely going to share the replay with my former teammates.
I'm sorry to hear about that. Yeah.
This is a really heartwarming session. And so thank you so much, Priya and Phyl. I think this comes in a very timely manner. Again, a lot of the resources will be summarized and recap, sent it out to our newsletter subscriber. So make sure you subscribe. And yeah, my main takeaway is we all need social support, during this job search process. And then second is treat that, nerve-wracking interview process actually as a conversation to get to know the job and, know how you can value add to that job. At the end of the day, you only need one job that fits you. Right. So I think as much as you're intimidated by the process, I think you should try how to turn the tide, right? Like making it like a two-way interview process, such that you can learn a lot from the hiring team and figure out what fits you. And obviously, Phyl's website, phyl.org, has a lot of resources. So folks, please go ahead and check them out. All right,
Can
now
I
with
just say a
that,
few words of thank you? I want to thank Marty Cagan for his 20 years of support and friendship making this possible. I want to thank Priya, who's you just saw how amazing she is, and she was such a big support to me through the writing, and so were so many others. And Shivi, you're amazing. You're an amazing
thank
host.
you.
So thank you. Really loved being here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Priya, and thanks,
Yeah,
Phil.
super fun. Thanks, everyone. And it's
Good
just
luck, everybody.
super fun to
And
see
thank
the
you.
chat.
And see you in about 2 weeks. We don't have programming next week. And happy Thanksgiving for folks who are in the US. And good luck. Please sign up for your job search console. Hope to see you in many, many of those. And get dream jobs and tag me and Theo and Priya when you find your right job. So thank you, everyone. Bye.
Looks like that. Do I need to? Well, thank you, everyone. I think I might still be live. I'm going to go ahead and leave the studio now.